What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and because the NHL is absolutely in love with giving content creators like me absolutely no time to do anything, the Stanley Cup Playoffs begin tomorrow. So here from the dying moments of my vacation, live from the Cambridge Suites in Halifax, Nova Scotia, I bring you my first round NHL playoff predictions, quicker than I have ever done them before. We're going to kick things off in the Eastern Conference. The champions of the Atlantic Division, the Florida Panthers, a massive regular season, up against the number 2 wildcard team, the Washington Capitals. And this might be the toughest out in the Eastern Conference. And the only reason that I say that is the Caps were really good on the road this year. I think they only lost 10 games in regulation on the road all year. Florida was dominant at home. This series is going to be decided specifically by the games that take place in Florida. I think this series is going the distance. I'm going to take the Florida Panthers in a full 7-game series. I think the depth of their scoring offense is just going to be a little bit too much for Washington. But man, this is going to be a fun series. I think it goes the distance. I'll take the Panthers in 7. The other Atlantic Division matchup sends us to Toronto, where the Leafs are going to play host to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now look, both of these teams obviously had phenomenal regular seasons. Two teams that are very, very alike, to be perfectly honest. The high top-end talent, they've got depth and strength on the defensive side. I would give the edge to Tampa Bay in that regard. I also certainly have to give the edge to Tampa Bay in goal. I think Andrei Vasilevsky, probably the best goaltender in the world right now. Jack Campbell is capable of playing towards that level, but I don't think he's got the consistency that an Andrei Vasilevsky has. And even if you're not a fan of the Leafs, you got to feel for this team, because it's like they have probably the greatest regular season in the history of their franchise, and they get rewarded by having played the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions in the first round. That could only happen to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm going to give this series to Tampa Bay. I'm going to take the Lightning in 6 games. I think they win it on home ice. If this goes to a 7th game, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see the curse be lifted from the Toronto Maple Leafs and see them go on to the second round. But I think the Lightning get this series done. I'll take them in 6. Next up is the Carolina Hurricanes, champions of the Metropolitan Division. They take on the number 1 wildcard team in the Eastern Conference, that being the Boston Bruins. Again, two what I think are fairly similar teams, but my God, Carolina's been on such a roll. I think they're winners of 6 straight games. They're 8-2 in their last 10 down the stretch. Just a monster season. I think more than double the goal differential that the Boston Bruins have. I think this is going to be a fun series. I just don't see how Boston takes this. I have to take Carolina in this. I think that's 3 straight that I've taken the favorites in the series. But I just don't. If I could see the pathway for the Bruins to get there, they're a pretty good road team this year, but they're not a dominant road team this year. And if you're not a dominant road team, I don't think you're taking multiple games off of Carolina in Carolina. So I'm going to take the Hurricanes in this one. And honestly, I think they probably get it done in 5. I'm a pretty big believer in this Carolina team. I'll take the Hurricanes in 5 games. Could be the end of an era in Boston. And the final Eastern Conference playoff matchup sees the New York Rangers playing host to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously, two teams that know each other very well, have a depth of playoff experience against each other as well. And I'm going to go in a bit of a different direction here. I'm actually going to take the Pittsburgh Penguins in the upset in this series. It's not that I don't believe in the Rangers. It's not that I don't believe in Igor Shesterkin, because I certainly do. The Rangers team obviously has exceeded expectations this year. I think it's fairly confident in saying that. Other than the Florida Panthers and I believe the Washington Capitals, the Pittsburgh Penguins had the 3rd fewest road losses in the Eastern Conference this year, at least in regulation. I know there were multiple overtime situations there too. This is a very good road team, a difficult out on the road, and I think that wild depth of playoff and Stanley Cup experience that this Pittsburgh Penguins team has, I think that winds up serving them well. I think the Penguins get the upset in this series. I think the Rangers won 3 of the 4 head-to-head matchups this year. I'm going to buck against that anyway. I'm going to take the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm going to take the Penguins to win this thing in a full 7-game series, which means winning Game 7 on New York's home ice. Let's slide over to the Western Conference now. The Western Conference champion, Colorado Avalanche, playing host to the number 2 wildcard team in the West, which is the Nashville Predators. And boy, windshield meet fly, fly meet windshield. And I don't mean to disrespect the Predators in any sense. They had a very good season. But when you look at this Colorado Avalanche team, and in comparison to Nashville, even though Nashville had more regular season success against Colorado this year, I think winning 3 of the 4 head-to-head matchups, the goal differential on the season, I think, is 5 or 6 times what Nashville has. Nashville kind of not limped into the playoffs, but they did kind of creep into the playoffs, and I just don't see it. I just think this is a series that's probably over relatively early. If you count the overtime and shootout losses, Nashville actually lost more games on the road this year than they won. They were 20-21. It's just not going to get it done against a team like Colorado. I'm going to take the Avs. I'm not going to take a sweep because that's disrespectful. It just feels so disrespectful to Nashville. So I'm going to take the Avalanche. I'm going to take them in 5 games. The other Central Division matchup sees the Minnesota Wild playing host to the St. Louis Blues, 2 teams that had very, very similar regular seasons. I'm actually going to take the upset in this series. I'm going to take the St. Louis Blues to win this thing. The goal differential is slightly better. I believe St. Louis won all 3 head-to-head matchups in the regular season this year. They're a team that has what I believe to be more playoff experience than the Minnesota Wild, although I haven't sat down and crunched the numbers. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. I don't know. I feel like look, the setup for this Minnesota Wild team, obviously, like this is the year they have to do anything, and I think they just ran into one of the worst playoff matchups that they could possibly have in the Western Conference. I don't see the pathway to them winning this series. I see the pathway to the St. Louis Blues winning the series. That's the way I'm going to go. I'm going to take this thing to go the distance. Let's take St. Louis to win the series. Let's take them in a full 7 games, which does mean winning Game 7 on Minnesota's ice. I think they get that done. Blues to the second round. And our final 2 Western Conference playoff matchups come in the Pacific Division. The Calgary Flames, the champions of the Pacific Division this year, play host to the number 1 wildcard team, who were the Dallas Stars. And Dallas and Nashville kind of figuring out the wildcard situation there in the Western Conference very, very late in the regular season. And Dallas, kind of like Nashville, actually just straight up in regulation lost more road games this year than they won, before you even take into consideration any games that happen to go the distance. Calgary very, very good at home this year. Johnny Gaudreau having what for a long time was an underrated regular season. A lot more people talking about it now. People talking about him like he might be a Hart Trophy candidate. A massive season for Johnny Gaudreau. A massive season for the Calgary Flames. I think they dispatched the Dallas Stars here fairly quickly. I'm going to take this series to Calgary and give it to them in 5 games, winning Game 5 on home ice. That's how I see it. Flames in 5. And the final playoff matchup here sees the Edmonton Oilers, the number 2 seed in the Pacific Division, taking on the number 3 seed, the Los Angeles Kings. Now, Los Angeles having another season where they traveled very well. We're a very good road team this year. Actually have a better road record than the Oilers had this year. And look, traveling off the West Coast, you understand how difficult those trips can be at times. So I think this is going to be a very competitive series. Genuinely, I think this series probably goes the distance. I am going to give the series to the Edmonton Oilers. I think they're a slightly better team. They won 3 of the 4 head-to-head matchups in the regular season, if memory serves me correctly. So let's take McDavid and the boys. Let's take Edmonton to win that series in 7 games. But this may be the dark horse, the sleeper, for the most fun and most interesting first-round playoff series. This is on the edge of a knife. Could genuinely go either way. I'm going to go with the Oilers and take them in a full 7 games. there you have it, folks. Those are my first round NHL playoff predictions. A video so fast I may not even be able to run a mid-roll ad in the middle of it, and that's for the creators out there. Thank you so much for checking them out. I wish the NHL gave me an extra day or two to really sit down and kind of dig in, but I had to get it out now or it was not going to come out at all. So I gave you a little piece of the end of my vacation, and I hope you appreciate that. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, reporting live from the lovely Cambridge Suites in Halifax, Nova Scotia. First round NHL playoff predictions in the books. How do you think the series are going to go? Obviously, you can listen to me talk all day long. What do you think is going to happen in the first round of the NHL playoffs? Let me know that in the comments section below, and we will see you again for round 2 NHL playoff predictions.